Hi guys. Oh squirrel. Anyway, I'm about to have such a I don't know if I should say trigger warning, to be honest with you, but we're about to have you have to approach the conversation that I'm about to have with you with a very open mind. And preconceived notions and preconceived judgments, you gotta put them in your pocket. Because what I'm about to say is not gonna be easy to hear for a lot of people, but it could be very eye-opening for a lot of people because I'm about to talk about a topic that's very contentious in nature. Okay. And given the state of the world and the way society is, it is going to ruffle some of your feathers for sure. I can guarantee that. But it might ruffle your feathers and be like, I do see some truth to that, and that's all I hope. That's all I hope, girl. Anyway, so I'm gonna start. I don't actually know how to start this. I have my laptop here, by the way, because I have the things I want to talk about over here. But, well, I want to talk about men and women in society and a dynamic that I have noticed. I will give credit to my noticing to the work that I have done this year. I have unlearned so many things. I have so many illusions have fallen because one thing about me, I love the truth. I love to get to know the truth. I like to get to the center of things even when they're uncomfortable for me. Discomfort does not put me off. In fact, I'm like, I think I'm onto something here when I'm feeling uncomfortable. So we all know men and the part they play in society and the way they have been cultured and the way they've been brought up socially, right? So we know men are also, I speak generally, I personally hold the belief and value that everyone is an individual. I will never judge you according to what is prevalent. Yes, I understand societal and cultural implications. I understand why things are the way they are. I understand nuance. Nuance, okay? So when I say men are narcissistic abusers, I speak of men as an entity and not men as individuals. Because with individuals, I judge them as they are. If you are a narcissist, I will just be like, you are a narcissist. But it doesn't reinforce my belief that men are narcissists because, anyway, we'll get to a point of that later in the video because I'm going to touch on something that talks about the same thing. But I was watching this TikTok and she said something and it put into words something that I already knew, but I didn't have the language for it. But she talked about how you have narcissistic abusers and you have narcissistic victims. Where you use your identity as a victim, because we all know narcissistic abusers, they're so obviously abusers and they're so obviously wrong, right? But we have people who are narcissistic victims where they use their victimhood as identities to either inflict harm or to justify the things they are doing or to justify like revenge and stuff like that. And that clicked something in me. And so I'm about to say, but I was like, men are narcissistic abusers and women are narcissistic victims. And that is the current dynamic that is going on between men and women. Right. Again, I recognize that people are individuals outside of what is happening in society and culturally because everyone has free will, right? And everyone has autonomy, right? And so I think that, anyway, I think this speaks for itself. Okay, so the structural loop of men. Men under the patriarchy are conditioned towards narcissistic traits. So they have entitlement, you have emotional detachment, you have domination, externalizing blame, fragility masters aggression, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So men weaponize dominance and emotional detachment, but women weaponize victimhood and woundedness. Okay. And both of them are forms of narcissistic leverage. Okay. I hate the word narcissistic, not because of what it means, but what it has been done to the past few years on the internet. But anyway, that's the word, so we're going to use it. So different tools, but same architecture. So men enact narcissism through an entitlement, women enact narcissism through victimhood, and both use their position to justify harm. So women's performance of narcissism happens through moral superiority, woundedness as currency, and harm justified through being hurt. Woundedness as currency, it's what was it? There's this thing that happens on internet spaces where it's a form of social currency to talk about your identity close to men and how either you hate them or and again, I understand why these things are happening. This is absurd. Actually, I'm not judging anybody. I am not judging anybody. I am commenting on a pattern that I have noticed, which is understandable given everything that has happened in society. However, as we will get to see later because I will discuss it, is that no tangible change will actually ever be had if this dynamic keeps going. No tangible change will be made if the dynamic keeps on prevailing. And I am guessing that at the core of all of this, at the core of this whole thing, people do actually want change. People do actually want to see a difference in the way people interact with each other. Women don't want to be victims for the rest of their lives. That is at the core of it. They men also do not appreciate the things that they are forced in by society. I know at the core of it, like we all talk about the male loneliness epidemic, okay? I'm not about to comment on that whole thing, but at the core of it, even they aren't enjoying the fruits of the patriarchy. No one is like at the core of it all, except there's so much that has happened. You know, when the system is designed to intentionally fracture relationships and intentionally fracture like any possible way of coming together. That's what's happening. And it's so funny because it happens so much that it runs rampant and no one really needs to supervise it anymore because people become their own enforcers of this dynamic, right? And that's what I kind of want to put light on because I know that people do genuinely want change. And so if I can offer even some information that like gets you closer to the truth of what you were trying to search for, I've done my job. And that's what I want to do. And that's what the whole point of this whole thing is for. I am not judging anybody. I don't think anybody is like, that's not my style. There's someone who says that.
Don't you want to judge me just a little bit?
There's an audio that's like, that's
not my style.
But that is not my style. I am not here to judge you whatsoever. I am here to deliver information. Okay? Okay? Do I shoot the messenger? I'm just a girl. Anyway, I'm a woman. Oh, my whole point is to say that people aren't relating. People are negotiating trauma identities, right? And gender justifies the script. Like, gender is justifying the whole script of that. Okay. Sorry, guys. There's a lot that I wrote, and I think, like, so again, let's touch on men and entitlement narcissism, right? Root. Men are taught emotions equals weakness, and power, autonomy, and dominance equals identity, right? We know that. We see them every day. We talk about this time and time again. So the male psyche is shaped like my value isn't being above. I'm entitled to obedience, comfort, and access. If I lose control, I lose myself. That's societal definition of being a man and manhood, you know? And so this produces coercion masked as leadership, detachment masked as strength, aggression masked as self-defense, and ownership masked as love. It's again not personal narcissism, it's cultural narcissism. Because again, society shapes men to turn out like that. Everything in society, from movies to books to shows to teachers to caretakers to songs, everything in society and culture shapes men towards this. So it is absolutely not a shock that this is the current state of the world and this is the way men are. It is not a shock whatsoever, because there's you know how people always telling you, don't say that propaganda will never work on you, or don't ever claim that you could never join a cult, because that is the exact breeding ground for you to, do all of those things. It's funny because that's exactly what happens to men. Men are taught that no one can cheat them out of that. They're superior intellectually, they're superior physically, they're superior in every single way. So when they're being pumped red pill shit, it is actually not a surprise that they do not think that they are being propagandized. It is not a shock, because the system intelligently designed itself to sustain itself. It's really not a shock. It's really not a shock. And I know that there's a whole thing of people have autonomy, right? And that's true. That is why people who do this, like, even under this whole thing, if you do something, the consequences are yours to bear, even though you're being brainwashed, like, your consequences are yours to bear. However, there should be some empathy and some taken into account that when everything is hell-bent on shaping you to be one thing, it is not a shock that someone turns out that way, and some of the fault isn't theirs to carry. That fault is also supposed to be, like, the systems should be getting some heat too. So if you turn your direction towards systems, and instead of trying to fix the person singular, then you kind of actually get to the root of the things, right? But let's keep going. So the man must be the one who is right. He must win, he must dominate, and he must be obeyed. That's the narcissistic architecture. How women are conditioned into victim narcissism. So the root: women are taught that softness is equals currency, woundedness is legitimacy, and morality is power. So the female psyche is shaped like, my value is in being hurt. And this isn't that this is what they're thinking, because in the men, that's not what they're thinking. They're not like, oh, my value is in this. It's just input. You operate on a value. A value is not something you constantly think about. A value is something you operate from. Okay? So when I say these things, you might think, but I don't think these things. That's not how it works. I'll hold your hand. I know. But it shows, because anyway, no, I won't get that right now. But the next one is, if I'm suffering, I'm right. And my pain is my leverage. So this produces victim morality. Manipulation via fragility, accountability avoidance, and emotional control through guilt. This is why in comment sections, or when someone is talking about the experience about going through, let's say, domestic violence, right? Again, trigger warning, guys. This is not an easy topic to talk about. Like, this whole video is probably not going to be easy. But you will see countless people under there being like, you are the reason that women are being set back. Why would you just not leave? Why would you not do this? Why would you not do this? I don't even feel sorry for you anymore, because this is your fault. This is your undoing. Hello. Let's actually pause for a minute and take a second to think about what the fuck you just wrote. Because what the hell? Where is that coming from? Because you would expect for someone as a woman to understand But this is what it is. The reason why people are acting that way is because the anger in them about this whole experience and the pain and the victimhood of being a woman, right, is at the forefront of them responding to the person that they're responding to. They aren't really thinking about this. Oh my God. Actually, I was going to talk about this later, but it still counts as this. Both of these sides, the woman and the man, both engage in dehumanization. They both engage in dehumanization. Women in the victimhood will dehumanize other women and will dehumanize men. Men will dehumanize other men and dehumanize women too. Like, yeah. And because that's the reason why someone in front of you is speaking about an experience that should be making you feel like, what do you need? Like, what do you need from me? And like giving them encouragement, like finding resources for them. Because time and time again, we discuss about how this is also very psychological. This is so psychology. This is so psychology. Oh my God. Like everything I'm discussing is so psychology because shit, I forgot what I was talking about. My brain made too many connections and I lost all of them. Anyway, I'll just keep going. And so, again, it's not women as narcissists, but the system positions women as victims whose victimhood grants moral dominance. So it's narcissism through helplessness. Okay. And this kind of, again, like I was saying, this is a dynamic that is codependent, right? They need each other for the men to act that way, and that's the reason why it's going on for this long. But it creates like a closed loop. So men's entitlement requires someone below, and women's victimhood requires someone above to blame, right? And so one is the active pole and one is the reactive pole. Different presentations, same psychological mechanism going on underneath. I don't want to be responsible for my inner world. So men externalize through force and women externalize through fragility, right? So people, again, aren't relating as human beings. People are relating through trauma identities, gender scripts, moral superiority, victim superiority, power performances, fragile egos, defensiveness, projection. So no one is actually speaking to each other. And I will say this because women don't see men as human beings anymore because of all the hurt that has happened. And that is why I am talking about the victimhood. Women do not see men as people. They don't. Because if they did, like I was talking about in the beginning, there would be some empathy about the situation. But the hurt has been so much that people have lost touch with their empathy. And it makes sense. It's the same thing with trauma. When you feel hurt for so long, when you feel consistently you're getting hurt, it's like almost like CPTSD. You start to become numb to the pain and not to your own actual pain, because that's a whole other thing. But it starts to metabolize through the way you interact with the world. It starts to metabolize. You are not separate from it, you know. So but that's the flaw in the whole logic though. You cannot make any real progress while denying someone's humanity. You cannot. Men are not these monsters and beasts. I'm not speaking on their actions. Again, please, there's nuance, because I know, and I will repeat it. It's fine. I never like to repeat it, but I understand that this is a very loaded subject, and I want people to understand, right? This is not about justifying the things that have happened. But again, you have to see men as human beings worth empathy, worth forgiveness, worth all these things that your anger will not allow you to even think of as a possibility. Yeah. Anyway, so where this goes next? The actual evolution is in man. Oh my God, not man. Men must learn emotional responsibility and not dominance, and women must learn personal responsibility and not helplessness. Right? And I think one way to do this is you have to integrate the trauma. You have to integrate your anger. Because when you integrate all of these things that you feel because of being a woman, and again, I understand everything. I only speak of this because I've lived the experience of the same thing because I'm a woman in society. I know exactly what it is like to have your life, I don't want to say taken over, because I know we have other things we do, we have other things we love, we have other things we think about. But for lack of a better word, your life to be dominated by anger towards men, that's not the point. That's not the point. It doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help society. It doesn't help men. It doesn't help anybody. No one moves forward. Everyone is stuck in time. Like you're stuck in time. So I was thinking about how this is also why a lot of movements, like, I don't want to say, again, I'm going to use absolute language, but I don't take it as absolute language. But this is why no real progress socially and culturally is made, no matter how many times people go for walks. And that's why I said, again, note, I said socially and culturally, because I do think marches that talk about abuse towards women and all those things, they do raise awareness. They do allow victims to know that they're not alone. They do allow for women to gather together and sit together in the harm that is being caused to them by the men in society, which is good. These spaces are very good for that, right? But they make little to no change culturally and socially because a lot of women don't want to forgive or metabolize the emotions of going through what it means to be a victim, and they're not seeking grounded justice. A lot of women want to harm men the same way they've been harmed. A lot of women want to harm men more than men have harmed them. And again, I absolutely understand, and it makes sense given the violence that women have been put at the hands of men across centuries, because it's not even just like it just happened yesterday. No. So I understand completely. However, that doesn't do anything. It really doesn't do anything. Actually, it hurts you more. Again, like I was saying, you're frozen in time. No one wants to walk around with all this anger and all this hurt. No. I've thought about these things for a while now, but I hesitate to say them because I don't want people to be like, you're betraying the women. You don't get it. Because I do. I really, really do. Just, I have a different perspective now through all the things that I've learned and all the healing that I've done. I have a different perspective now. Okay. So again, like I said, movements they name the harm, they expose the pattern, and they demand visibility. But they cannot metabolize pain for individuals. So if women collectively have unprocessed rage, unspoken desire for retaliation, not really unspoken because we joke all the time about beating the man, and I do laugh at those, don't get me wrong. I do engage in a little, sometimes, reposting of a video about that, but I think I'm going to stop. Unhealed humiliation, inherited generational trauma, and again, a moral superiority identity tied to suffering. There's no march, there's no hashtags, no awareness that can create a cultural shift. None. And It's because the inner dynamic remains unchanged. You don't want justice, want emotional repayment. And so that's not really progress, it's just different flavor of the same cycle, you know? And again, when I was talking about dehumanization, women dehumanizing men, it's not the same. I'm not saying that women are abusers, by the way. That's not what I am saying, because no. But I am saying that the response to male violence is often not healing. It's just a mere dehumanization. And so a lot of women, again, they don't see men as human beings. They don't believe men can change. They don't want to repair. They just want men, to feel the same fear and helplessness. And they want emotional symmetry. Like they want men to feel the exact same way they feel as women right now, and not justice. And so, but again, you can't metabolize trauma if you are still dependent on the identity that it gives you, right? So it's not, again, not as easy as women don't want to forgive. It's just that forgiving would collapse the identity that you have built around the wound, right? And identity is a very important thing in society. People place a lot of value in identities. What the fuck is that? Sorry, it's just really itchy. But yeah, so same with men. Men cannot stop abusing until they release their identity built around dominance, control, and entitlement. And both genders are clinging to the identities that are incompatible with revolution or evolution. Relational evolution. But yeah, so also, I want to reiterate when I speak about men and women, I know that there's individuals who are different, right? I know there's individuals, again, like I said, I know everyone has autonomy. I am speaking about the dominant cultural script. If I say women, the dominant cultural script for women. When I say men, the dominant cultural script for men. Okay, so I hope we have that clear. So before we go further, I'm going to name my positions. So I'm going to name the things that I've said in statements. I believe that true social progress requires women to heal past the point where they need men to pay emotionally for the collective harm. I believe the current culture rewards women for staying wounded, and this happens in social circles between women and how we engage and the things we celebrate and the things that make us feel like we are safe with each other when we speak things like, I hate men, you know. I believe that women who haven't metabolized rage interpret forgiveness as betrayal and justice as vengeance. I believe men are dehumanized in response to being harmed, and this blocks actual transformation. Yes. Yes. Okay, so now I'm gonna go more into the psychological power of being the harmed party. So being the wounded victim and how, because I said there's a power that comes from that, and sometimes it's not very easily conceivable. So I will expand on that. So most people think victimhood is like a powerless position, right? But socially, it actually carries a very specific kind of power, especially for women under patriarchal structures. Because patriarchy harms women, women gain moral authority through being harmed. And once the society codes you as a wronged one, you receive a set of privileges that are rarely acknowledged, right? Which is why you can have the term narcissistic victim, because the powers and the privileges that you get from being a victim can be misused and can be abused. Okay. So victimhood gives authority. The harmed party becomes the one whose voice must be centered. right? And we've seen this time and time again in spaces. Me saying that something clicks, right? Their interpretation becomes the truth. Their emotional reality overrides other perspectives. It's not seen as an opinion, it's seen as a testimony, and testimonies cannot be debated. So, this is why people will speak over a man, even if a man is being vulnerable, because even like about conversations about gender, of course, even when the man is saying something that makes sense. Why? Because the harmed party knows best. And a great example of this, I don't know if you came across, I don't know if it was a podcast or something, but there was this place and Julia Fox was there. It was Julia Fox and it was two other men, I think. And this man was speaking about, and he actually said something that made sense. And actually it was in support of what women usually say. But I remember Julia Fox kept shutting him down and telling him men don't have an opinion, or men don't have an opinion, or men can't say anything in this.
Because I think the youth needs to hear what real men are. I think there's there's masculinity.
But what are real men?
Right. To me, a real man is a responsible man.
Because every time a man does some fuck shit, they'll be like, that's not a real man. And it's like, looks like a man to me.
I think a real man is in touch with his feminine
looks like a duck
side.
and it walks like a duck,
I mean?
yeah.
I think a real man is knows how to unstrap from his
I don't know.
ego.
I think the real man thing is just the thing like that people invented to like excuse bad behavior. You know?
Yeah,
like all men are real men.
Said like a real man.
Period.
Yeah, I think.
And I remember she was being celebrated so much for that. Everyone was like, yes, because why is a man there? Why is a man speaking? Why is it this? Why is it this? And I'm in my head, I'm thinking right now, you can't expect for there to be actual change if that is how you treat the other party. Because I want to compare it to how people treat children and how people tell children their opinions have no weight. They should just sit in the corner and they should be seen and not heard, right? Because people use that phrase for women and children, right? But how do you expect to move forward and talk to the other person as an adult who there can be no conceivable change if that is how you treat men genuinely. And again, I am not like pro men or pro women. I am pro a healed collective and pro people. Yeah, no, just a healed collective. I feel like everyone deserves better than this. Anyway, victimhood gives social protection. Once someone is seen as a victim, any direct challenge to them is viewed as cruelty because critique becomes insensitivity, disagreement becomes violence, and accountability becomes blaming the victim. So the victim identity becomes a shield. So anything that threatens the self-image is deflected through the lens of harm, right? And also victimhood exempts you from accountability. If all your behaviors can be traced back to I was hurt, then you never have to examine your choices, your emotional patterns, your projections, and your relational impact. You can always just say, I did that because I was traumatized. I did that because men are shit. Because it's the same reason why I was like, I'm going to stop reposting the women beating men memes. Again, like I'm saying, I've taken part in the culture. I have not been immune to this, guys. But it's the same reason why when you see posts where women abusing men, people will always be like, yeah, he probably did something to deserve it. I support women's rights and wrong. Guys, I've said these things. I've said these things too. In fact, I've kikied once or twice when I've seen a man being beaten by a woman because I've been like, hell yeah, girl. Get his ass. Again, But no. Because there should be no joy derived from causing harm to anybody. That's moral superiority to think that you can do something because you've been hurt. Your heart justifies it. So, yeah, victimhood grants moral innocence. When someone sees themselves as the harmed one, they never have to face their own shadow. So the psyche will create a binary where I am the one who was harmed, they are the one who harms. I never harm, they harm, and I victim, caveman. But so there's no room for recognizing manipulation, passive aggression, emotional weaponry, cruelty through silence, dishonesty, ego-driven choices, self-sabotage. Actually, oh my God, guys, I'll tell you something that talks about dehumanization, right? We're going back to a point that I talked about, not what I'm talking about right now. Stay with me, y'all. But, what is it called? Oh my God, I forgot. Give me a second. I saw this video on the internet the other day, and it was this girl who was like, my boyfriend forced me out of the kitchen and decided to cook me a meal, and he never cooks. And it was like rice and stew, and it didn't like look that good. It wasn't like chef quality meal. The presentation wasn't that good.
Oh my God, my Shayla, my Shayla.
And I, in my head, before I even opened the comments, I was like, that's so sweet. Like, he doesn't know how to cook, but he took the time to cook for her because he wanted to do something nice. And despite it not being his area of expertise, he took the time to still do it anyway because he wanted to show her his love. I opened the comments and everyone's like, this pissed me off. Men doing bare minimum. Why are you celebrating? People were posting photos of their boyfriend's meals, which were like chef grade meals, or like, my boyfriend made me this, my boyfriend made me this. And in my head, I was like, damn, I thought it was sweet. Why everyone being such a hater? And I was actually talking to my friend about it. And I was saying how people are so on the attack men that they don't, like it's like talking about dating TikToks, right? And how TikTok is like an echo chamber of very toxic advice. Oh my God, I would never go to TikTok for advice on dating. But someone was like, is it weaponized incompetence or is it just a normal human fucking mistake? And so I brought that back and I was like, not everyone is taught how to cook, and that's really not their fault, right? I have friends who are girls who don't know how to cook. If I asked them to make me food, they would make me something worse than that, actually, right? And they have no problem with the fact that they can't cook because they'll find other alternatives. They'll either buy food or they'll buy the easy meals to prepare. That guy probably also used to eat like that. He used to eat that same food, right? Like, why? Like, I don't know. I was just like, you take something so beautiful and turn it evil because of projection and because of so much. The whole point of dehumanizing men is that you don't see men as people. You see men as this creature, these monsters that abuse, and everything that they do is always to discriminate against women, right? Okay. I've been talking for so long, actually. Sorry, guys. I'm feeling but anyway. Victimhood makes your emotions unquestionable. So the harmed party's emotions always become valid, justified, and unimpeachable. So therefore, anger is righteous, sadness is sympathetic, fear is truthful, disgust is moral, and resentment is understandable. No one will ask, because we talk about this a lot. If you are working on any part of yourself, or if you get to any of this TikToks, you will be told that emotions are not an accurate representation of reality. That doesn't mean they're not valid. That doesn't mean they're not real. That doesn't mean that they don't tell you something. That's not what I'm saying. But emotions are not an accurate sometimes are not an accurate representation of reality. You can feel hurt by someone's actions because you perceived it as this way, but that was not what their actions were at all. Because a lot of things, you perceive a lot of things depending on the state of being that you are, the state of mind that you are affects how you perceive reality, right? And so something that can be a neutral expression can cause you harm because you interpret it as harmful, right? It doesn't again mean that your emotions are not valid. The way you interpreted the reality is not valid. That's not what I'm saying, because two truths exist at once. And life isn't black and white. It's gray as fuck. It's very ambiguous. That's why you have to be able to validate people's realities and emotions, because they are real. They are real. Okay. So that's not what I'm talking about. But no one is asking if the emotion is accurately representing what is happening, if the emotions are being weaponized, if the emotions are masking something deeper. Is this really true, or is this a projection of what they expect from this? But because when you are a victim, no one will dare to do that, which actually I usually make a point not to do. But anyway, let's not get into what I personally do. That's not what we're here for. So, letting go of this identity feels like letting go of the only kind of power that women are rewarded in society. Because that's the only way that women get to experience power in this society. Okay, not only, that's very absolute, but I don't mean it absolutely. But letting go of that feels like letting go of the power, but I actually want to assure you that it's not. Letting go of that actually is freedom. It really is. And I am speaking from experience, because that is the reason why I can have this conversation with you. And that is the reason why I am able to identify the things that I'm identifying. I wouldn't be able to identify these things if I didn't let go of the identity. And that's not to mean that once in a while I will not see it creep around. Because again, like I said at the beginning of this, society is hell-bent on shaping people a certain way. The same way it shapes men, it's the same way it shapes women. Again, in everything. Books, clothes, shows, movies, art, songs, everything. Videos, social media, people talking, authority figures, the way the world works, everything, you know? So, releasing the victim, and I'm going to talk about something that I think was something that gave me a back and forth in my mind for quite a while, was releasing the victim identity can feel like losing the right to express anger. And that's not true. You have every right to express your anger. However, when you lose the identity, you realize that your anger is a grounded anger, like it comes and processes things differently. It shows up differently. I was talking about this with my friend the other day, and I was like, people process anger very differently as well. People are very different in their mechanics of who they are as a person. I'm the kind of person who my anger is not usually outwards. If you see my anger outwards, that's because I've been pushed past the point of no return, right? And I genuinely have to say something because now someone's taking the piss. I tend to process my anger very internally. Like, I metabolize and alchemize my anger internally, and I have no problem with that because I don't see a need to externalize it. Some people externalize their anger no matter how small or big it is. And again, that's not wrong. I just know that everyone is very different with their anger. My anger is very quiet. My anger will withdraw me. Like, I will withdraw myself when I am angry. Because that's just who I am, you know? And again, this perpetual victimhood isn't because women enjoy being victims. I don't think anyone enjoys being a victim. Being a victim is not a fun place to be. It could just be that you don't want to be powerless. And that's so understandable. That's so understandable, girl. I get it. But women need to learn or need to also be taught ways in which to hold power outside of victimhood, softness, or moral purity. Because there's so much more to power than that. There's so much more to power in how it looks in men, and there's so much more to power in how it looks in women. You know? So let's get to the juicy part. What does grounded justice actually look like in practice? This actually brings me to something that I said a while ago. People have confused the fact that punishment is supposed to be about correction and not about causing harm. But now in society, punishment is about causing harm and not about redirection or rehabilitation, which is where we've lost the plot entirely as a people. Not even just like men and women, just entirely as a people. But again, so most people think justice is about punishment and moral correction, but grounded justice is different. It's justice that remains connected to reality and not the emotional theatrics people use to reenact power. So, truth without narrative inflation, right? So, grounded justice demands precision, clarity, no exaggeration, no embellishment, no selective storytelling, no rewriting to center any part of the story, right? You name what happened, what the impact was, and what the pattern is. So, not what your ego felt, what morality says should have happened, and what will make you the innocent protagonist, you know? So truth becomes the anchor and not pain. Hell no. Okay. So most people want accountability that harms, shames, and breaks the other person. But accountability doesn't actually require humiliation. Accountability is naming the behavior, naming the impact, naming the responsibility, naming the boundaries that now exist because of what has taken place, and not moral degradation, stripping someone of their humanity, public punishment, emotional revenge, or I want you to feel what I felt. Because humiliation blocks repair. No one is going to want to repair after being humiliated. Even you wouldn't want to repair after being humiliated. So grounded accountability kind of makes repair possible, you know? Repair that matches reality. This is also such a lesson I've personally had to learn in my personal life. But grounded justice asks what can actually be repaired, what is impossible to restore, what is the appropriate consequence. Is this a relational wound or a relational ending? What responsibility belongs to them and what belongs to me? It avoids impossible demands. And this impossible demands is actually such a key thing. You cannot expect. You see, the same way it's not plausible to repair all the trauma you've experienced since you were a child in 5 months, in a year. You cannot expect the same from anybody else. You cannot expect people to change immediately. Sadly, I wish. Oh my God, I wish. I really do wish. But no, it doesn't work like that. People, as they're changing, they will make mistakes. They will do the same things. Why? Because it is so ingrained in them. And so breaking those patterns takes energy and time. Time. Sadly, actually, but it does. It also avoids fantasies of transformation. Meet people where they are. Do not fantasize of who you want them to be, or who you expect them to be, or who you think they are. Oh, that is, oh my God. That is a recipe for disaster, actually. It also avoids patriarchal or matriarchal scripts. It avoids emotional ransom, and it avoids utopian expectations of closure. We need justice that can exist in the real world as it is. The people who would experience a completely healed generation are probably gonna be here like 100 years from now or something. Because again, healing generational stuff takes a while. Holding accountability and compassion together. Again, it's the whole thing I was talking about. Two truths can exist at the same time. But a lot of people struggle to hold two truths that exist at the same time, especially if the truths feel contradicting. But like I said, life isn't black and white. It's gray as fuck. You have to be able to hold two things that are contradicting and hold them without trying to resolve them, to be able to actually move through life, because a lot of things will be like that. You don't have to collapse. Don't collapse any of them. Don't collapse any into molding into this. Just feel that tension. That tension exists for a reason. But someone can't hold the you were wounded and you're responsible. They'll always collapse into one. Either over empathy with no boundaries or over accountability with no humanity. But holding both is required, and holding both requires a maturity. You know. This is what I was talking about with dehumanization allows people not to hold these two truths again at once. And sorry. Okay. But you should see the root without excusing the fruit, like what I was saying. Understand why someone is the way they are, have empathy for why the way they are, because society literally breeds people to be who they are without excusing what they're doing. So understanding that trauma, conditioning, squirrel, learned scripts, inherited patterns without excusing how those patterns make them behave. How that conditioning gives them the right tools to cause harm in people's lives, because behavior has consequences. Trauma explains, but it doesn't excuse, And again, impact matters, and wounds don't give moral license. If their wounds don't give them moral license, our wounds don't give us moral license either. Because we understand the harm that society has caused in men, but we hold them accountable for what they do to women. Again, we should understand how the harm caused by men to us allows us to act, like causes us to act, but your trauma doesn't excuse your behavior, kind of thing. Because we are not immune just because we are women. We are not immune to perpetuating harm. We really aren't. We really aren't. Just because we are the victims does not mean that we do not cause harm. And actually, I refuse to identify myself as a victim. I'm not a victim. I mean, unless I am, but you know what I mean. Also, with that, don't merge with people's pain, because this tends to happen when you are increasingly like over empathy, like we were talking about. Understand their pain, but don't merge with their pain. Feel them, Don't become them. Boundaries. Okay. Relational evolution and gender roles drop. Anyway, men stop relying on dominance. Women stop relying on moral authority. Power becomes a negotiation and not an assumption. So this allows for collaboration, honesty, non-defensive leadership, and shared choice making, because both people are approaching each other as human beings who both have something to contribute, who have both something to say, whose realities deserve a seat at the table, and not, why are they speaking? Because both women and men do that to each other. Emotional labor becomes symmetrical. Again, these are all things that feminism and women actually want, and this movements are trying to achieve, So women stop becoming emotional managers, and men stop becoming emotional children. Because both regulate their emotions, both bring emotional clarity, and both take responsibility for their triggers. You cannot overmanage people, and you cannot expect to be managed by other people. Hello? Anyway, intimacy stops being a performance because men stop performing vulnerability. Reminds me of this. I hate that movie. I actually even left a review about it. It's called Before Sunrise. I saw that movie and everyone was talking about how it's going to be such a good movie and wow, blah, 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 such a love story. I watched it expecting perfection. I was utterly disappointed. No, And actually, let me vent. Sorry, we're gonna take an intermission, and I'm gonna read you my review because I feel it's important. And I gave it 2 stars on Letterboxd because I was like, what the fuck? And I only gave it 2 stars because I liked the aesthetic and the cinematography. I think that's what that's called. But I liked that, so I was like, okay. But so I said, guys, not me talking about a movie review in the middle of this video, but I think it still works. But especially if you've watched them, if you've watched the movie, I hope maybe you'll agree with me, right? Before Sunrise is dreamy and beautiful, but it's not just a love story. You notice Jesse immediately, but in 2 different ways. On the train, he seems casual, curious, a little awkward, just another young guy passing through life. Once he's off the train and the conversations start, everything changes. Suddenly, he's performing every question, every observation, every deep thought is calculated to impress, to control, and to assert cleverness. The boy in the train disappears and is replaced by someone emotionally stunted, trying to manufacture intimacy while masking arrested development as charm. It's subtle, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Real. I was actually triggered the whole movie. You can tell from the way he offered to play questions just to ask about sexual feelings, the way he tries to sound deep, the way he flirts. It's all about him, his ego, his need to feel clever. Even when he says he feels like a 13-year-old boy who doesn't know how to leave, it reveals his arrested development. People think, oh, cute. Oh, he's being vulnerable. Hell no, he's telling you who he is. I would have thought of that as him being vulnerable if everything else in the movie did not support the fact that it was his stupid arrested development. Anyway, Celine is alive. She's curious, thoughtful, present. She doesn't just react, she engages. Even when she's adapting to him, minimizing his ego-driven critiques, or noticing her own feelings through his point of view, she's doing it on her own terms. I will add again that I think a lot of the things that she was doing are due to how women are conditioned to be around men. Because a lot of these things should have been enough of a red flag for her to say fuck you to him and will leave. That movie should have been 30 minutes max. because she should have gone back home, But anyway, the moment before they sleep together is a perfect example, right? She hesitates, she says she doesn't want to, then acts on how she feels. But this is actually what makes me talk about the other thing, is you can tell she was wrestling with a lot of conditioning and wrestling with how he would view her. And I don't mean that she couldn't have taken part in the sex because she wanted to. That's not what I'm saying, because that would be implying that women can't think for themselves outside of conditioning. I don't think that's true. Anyone can think for themselves outside of conditioning. But the reason why it made me think that way is because she was like, I don't want to sleep with you because I think it would hurt too much. Like, I would do this and this and this. And the reason why it also leads me to the conclusion of it being pressure through societal expectations and through seeing herself through his eyes is because he didn't even do anything to comfort her past the point of telling her, I understand, but it wouldn't mean that to me. It would mean something like this to me, or this and this and this. He just said, oh. And then she was like, why am I so complicated? And then he said, I don't know. Hello? 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 If my boyfriend ever said something like that to me, I would, okay, we talked about not violence towards men, but I would be like, what the fuck? What the fuck? You can tell that I'm wrestling with something that's stressing me out. And I ask you, why am I so complicated? And you say, I don't know. Oh, anyway, we'll get back to the thing. So, one of the clearest examples of Jesse's emotional stunting is the palm reader scene. He immediately dismisses her experience, calls her a liar, but he literally believes in the idea that people are fractions of souls. And he feels that way just because his ego was bruised by her statement about him. Because when she was reading Celine's palm, she said all these nice things about her and then touched his for a second and said, are you with him or do you just made him something? I don't remember. And she was like, that's okay, he's learning. That hit his ego because he's an insecure man. And I don't use that as an insult. He is an insecure man. And so that hit his ego. And so he decided to ruin that whole experience for Celine and start calling that woman a liar and tell her that she doesn't know anything. And you knew it was his ego because he said the whole part about she's so condescending. Hello? He found it condescending again, like I'm saying, the way your inner state causes how you interpret reality. Because when she said he's learning, she might have meant that he's learning to be curious. He's learning to be as courageous and brave as she was saying Celine was. But he took it as condescending. Why? Because his whole ego is fragile. And anything that attacks this glass house or this house made of cards that he has built as an identity for himself, then he has to retaliate with way more proportional. Like, it's more than needed. Like, the anger was not, like, why the fuck are you even that angry? But anyway, so. And then he claims this deep philosophical understanding, but the second someone else has an experience that doesn't center him, he can't tolerate it. He destroys joy and intuition he can't control while thinking he's profound. That contrasts everything. The film's dreaminess, the streets of Vienna at night, the light, the slow movement, the music softens everything and makes the romance feel effortless. But if you pay attention, you can see the patterns. Jesse consumes experiences and people. Celine navigates, manages, and retains the self. The romance feels magical because of the setting, but underneath, it's complex, uneven, and real. The film rewards noticing small things, the joy he undercuts, like when she loves the poem and his response is to point out that he probably didn't write it and it was fake. The way she carries her curiosity, the subtle labor she does while staying herself, like managing his reaction after the palm reader. It's beautiful and dreamy, but also sharp and honest. And that tension is what makes it stick. And so I said, but the movie gets 2 stars because the entire time he pissed me off because I couldn't unsee who he was. Like I talked about. But yeah, that was like intimacy stops being performance, right? Because he was approaching this very strategically. I was actually, in my head, I was like, this feels very predatory. And I don't mean predatory in the way that, this is like an assault, abusive predator. That's not what I meant. But it felt like there was something he was chasing and seeking after. He wasn't actually seeing her. He was seeing who she is in reference to him. He wasn't, oh my God. And there's one scene, oh my God, why is this becoming like, I talk about the movie? But I'm going to talk about one place. But there's this one scene where she's pointing out like on the posters and she's talking about what's on the posters. And he's staring at her as she speaks. And I personally will hate that narration in movies and in real life for the rest. Like, I don't care what it is. I don't care what it is. I hate when women are talking about something and explaining something and the men are not listening to what they, or even women, whoever it is, and they're not listening to what the person is saying. They're just staring at them in desire. They're like, when someone's explaining and then their partner's just like looking at them. Oh, that's such a form of objectification. I'm sorry. You can say it's not that deep, but it is that deep. Because in this moment, I am offering you another part of myself. I am offering you my mind. I want you to meet me with your mind. I don't want you to consume me. I don't want you to consume me and start, you're desiring me in a way. What? No, stop. Ugh. So I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. I hate that when it's shown in movies. I will never be the person who loves that. There's times to stare at your partner. Sometimes when they're presenting something in front, like for example, or you're watching them as they do something that they love, you can stare at them in admiration because what they're offering is physical. It's visual. But when I'm speaking to you and I'm trying to describe to you, like I'm talking to you about my, let's say, research paper, and you're staring at me like, and you're not listening to me, bitch, please don't piss me off. Anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about. Anyway, so, so what your detachment from roles gives you, right? Because you're not interested in being the victim, the righteous one, the innocent one, the morally correct one, the powerful one, the this, whatever identity you're clinging to, you can perceive the system with clarity that a lot of people will not be able to see through. So you don't need your insights to protect you emotionally. Most people use their analysis to defend their identity. But if you don't, you use it to understand reality, right? So this creates objective intuition, right? Because when you are caught up in the mess, for lack of a better word, if you're in the tangles, you can't see from a detached perspective. You can't see the tangles. You're just in the tangles. You're tangled. You can't move. You can't do anything except maybe reach your hand this way, but you can't really see it. So, you will be able to also critique women without feeling like you're betraying women because your identity is not being derived from victimhood, right? And you should be able to critique both women and men. You should be able to. But critiquing women feels like a taboo in society right now. And you have to ask yourself why. Because of everything you've talked about above, You can critique men without needing them to pay for history because when you metabolize your anger, you separate systemic truth from personal vendetta. You don't carry systemic vendetta as your own personal vendetta because those are two different things. It also takes me to there's a video I made about how people are feeling entitled to people for representation when you're not entitled to representation from a person, but from a system. From the systems, yes. From individuals, absolutely not. It doesn't work like that, I'm full of hot takes today, but something that really pisses me off is when I know a lot of people value representation. Representation is very important, right? People love to see the experiences and people who look like them and people who experience the world like them show up in media because you feel like, wow, my story has a place. You know, my story has a seat at the table, whatever it is for you. But I get so pissed off with yesterday. I was watching this video and the girl was talking about how Lara from Cat's Eye, she's brown, right? And she was like, she doesn't know what that girl has done for brown girl representation. I have no problem with this spot, by the way. She's like, she's cool and she's hot and she's unapologetically cool and hot because she knows who she is and she's not sorry about it. She's just cool and hot. And she was saying how brown girls are usually represented as the quirky people who hate themselves, like they have to be the funny, side character or whatever. And yeah, fair enough. And then someone in the comment section was like, and she's openly queer as well. Like, wow, that's so beautiful. Then someone under that was like, yeah, but she's like Billie Eilish, where she's just queer and she rides on the waves of queerness, but we never see her touch a girl with a 10-foot pole or something. And that grinded my gears. That grinded my gears because people do not owe you representation. People do not owe you their life so you feel like they're representation enough. They don't owe you their queerness as a spectacle. We're doing this thing where we're objectifying people again, because when you start to think people can represent you, but they're not representation. People are people. People are people. When you box them in, you start to objectify them, because what the fuck do you mean that she's fake queer because she's not showing what? What? That's literally another branch of objectification. Let's be so serious. Let's, like, what the fuck is that even supposed to mean? I think we need to, like, re-examine your relationship with people who you look at as representation and people who you look up to. Do not objectify someone in the name of they need to provide this for me. They're this for me. They're this for me. These are human beings like you and me. No one, you are not entitled to any kind of representation from a person. From institutions, yes. From people, abso-fucking-lutely not. Abso-fucking-lutely not. That's a bit insane. Oh my god. But anyway, it also kind of travels back to the whole thing about... No, I'll talk about that in a later... Actually, I'll talk about that in a YouTube video. I have plans for that. So you have to be able to separate institutions and systems from people. You can understand how people interplay and how people enforce the structures and the systems, absolutely, but you have to separate them too, because if you don't separate them too, there's misplaced blame. There's misplaced blame. There's misplaced hurt. There's misplaced anger. Like, you get what I'm trying to say. You will not be emotionally incentivized to distort reality, because victimhood rewards distortion, righteousness rewards performance, trauma identity rewards black and white thinking. Like we've talked about, there's no such thing as black and white thinking. Things are incredibly nuanced. Things are incredibly gray, So when you're not participating, if anyone says anything about my English, that's actually racist. Hello? But anyway, you're not oh my god. You're not participating in those incentives, so you actually see the landscape. So what replaces narcissistic gender roles, right? Mutual responsibility, because if both people are examining themselves and both people are seeing what they do and how it harms other people, people will self-monitor. People will, admit their part to play in this kind of things. They will regulate their impact. They will regulate their emotions. They will own their shadow. They will own, everything. So no one is going to be the good one. No one is the emotional one. And no one is the authority, because you are your own authority, kind of. yeah, ethical intimacy. So this is not about purity. It's not about performance. It's not about roles. It's not about scripts. It's not about trauma reenactment. Hello, we're living that in the past. We're living that in the past. I don't know if you are tired, but I was personally so tired of engaging in this kind of dynamic because it drains you. It drains you. It really does. It really does. In the moment, it it feels very justified. Not even in the moment. It just generally feels very justified because again, I understand where all these things are coming from. I absolutely understand. But it's very exhausting. It's very exhausting. It takes away your energy, depletes your energy, depletes your joy, it depletes so many things. And so ethical intimacy should be focused on autonomy, on honesty, accountability, compassion, boundaries, presence. So intimacy moves from performance to choice. I was actually talking about this with my friend the other day. And I was like, there's a lot of things that I do in my relationship that if people were to hear, they would probably think I'm crazy and they'd probably label it as you don't love each other, or you don't love him, or he doesn't love you, or blah, 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 blah. Because the way that I practice my love and the way I practice to intentionally be in relationship with my partner is very choice driven and not performance driven. It's not script based at all, which means that it's odd, for lack of a better word. It's odd. If anyone, I think about this a lot and I think about it and I'm always like, if anyone was to see and understand the inner workings of my relationship, they'd probably be like, side eye. God, what are you doing? You know? But like I said to my friend, I'm very interested in having a love in a relationship that celebrates autonomy and sovereignty and celebrates choice and celebrates reality of being a human being with emotions, of being a person who feels and experiences things very deeply and gets affected by some things. Like it's very intuition based. Like I'm very, very, very adamant on cultivating such a relationship and such an environment in my relationship. And so, yeah. And I'm very glad that I have a partner who is very willing to go through the discomfort with me because it's very uncomfortable for both of us because you're going against normal scripts, you know? Sometimes I even I will second guess myself, but I never listen to my second guess because I usually know that's just what's it called? Conditioning speaking, because when my intuition says something, I feel it. And I've cultivated enough of a relationship with my body that I know when my intuition has spoken to me because it feels like inner harmony. It feels like my whole body saying yes to something. I don't know how to explain it further than that. But I know there's like a click. And so when anything comes up after that, that's like, no, this and this, I know like this. It's just my conditioning trying to pull me back so I can act normal again. But it's fine, you know? So, yeah, I think that's what I have to say. This was such a mess because I kept pausing and coming back, and I would lose my notes because reading from notes is quite hard. I wish I had I have all the information, but I need to be prompted, you know? But I hope you got something from this. I hope you felt called out in a good and helpful way and not in a harmful way, because that was not my intention whatsoever. I don't come here to point fingers and be like, you're the problem and this is a problem. I come to point fingers at the problem because I know how much we actually want healing and how much, anyway, how much everybody wants to move forward. from all of this. And I hope that this gives you something to start with, gives you insight on something to build on, But I love you guys. And I've been holding your hand throughout all of this. I'm even giving you a hug because I love every single one of you. And I hope it is such a dream of mine that everyone heals and everyone becomes free and everyone operates from choice rather than indoctrination, for lack of a better word. Someone used it as a blanket word. But anyway, love you guys. And I will see you the next time I'm yapping at you about something else.